For years, Burkina Faso lived under a shadow. Militants struck at will, vanishing into forests, burning markets, leaving families to bury their dead in silence. The countryside bled. And recent precision drones now stalk the treetops. Ground forces seal escape routes. No more warnings. No more waiting. Terror convoys are obliterated before they can move. Camps once thought unreachable are erased within hours. And at the center of this seismic shift, this is not merely about battlefield gains. It is about reclaiming stolen ground, rebuilding forgotten villages, and reminding every child, mother, and farmer, you are not alone. Do not look away. What comes next may change how we read the map of West Africa. Subscribe and witness a nation rising from the soil. For years, Burkina Faso's soil was scorched not by sun, but by silence. The silence of abandoned villages, of mothers mourning without justice, of a nation forced to bow before shadows. Armed groups moved like smoke, invisible, fast, and cruel. They struck by night, vanished by day, and mocked the state's inability to hold ground. But then the sky opened. It began quietly. No parades, no public declarations, just the soft hum of drones circling high above the forests. They did not strike first. They watched. Patiently, ruthlessly. For weeks, unmanned aerial vehicles traced the paths of convoys that once passed unnoticed. They hovered above motorcycles weaving through brushland. They hovered over leaders hiding under trees, believing they were safe. And when the rhythm was understood, when every habit was mapped, the silence turned to thunder. The TB2 and Akinci drones descended not like machines, but like judgment. One by one, targets that had long escaped retribution were reduced to ash. Hidden depots exploded in orange clouds. Camps once thought unreachable were incinerated. Trees once used as shields became markers of death. The sky no longer covered the enemy. It condemned them. But the campaign was not fought in the air alone. On the ground, something new stirred. No longer did soldiers respond to calls. They preempted them. Rapid intervention battalions, trained for speed and precision, moved in harmony with the drones above. Their tactics were no longer improvised. They were orchestrated. Every strike from the air was followed by an iron footstep on the soil. Roads were blocked. Exits sealed. Survivors captured or eliminated before they could regroup. It was warfare with rhythm, a cadence of conviction. And that rhythm had a composer, President Ibrahim Traoré. A soldier turned statesman, Traore understood that modern war is not just about firepower, it is about foresight. He broke the mold of reactive defense. Instead, he built tempo, foresight, and synergy. Under his command, Burkina Faso's forces did not just evolve, they synchronized. He fused technology with terrain, soldiers with civilians, intelligence with instinct. Surveillance no longer meant waiting. It meant designing the battlefield. The drones became the eyes. The battalions became the hands. And the people became the heartbeat. Traore saw that the soil alone would not protect his country. But if the soil could speak to the sky, if the eyes in the clouds could listen to the feet on the ground, then the nation could become indivisible. Villages once left to fend for themselves became part of a broader shield. Farmers became informants. Traders warned of movements. Local volunteers became sentinels. Fear turned into coordination. This was no longer a war of attrition. It was a war of architecture, one where the state designed every battle rather than stumbled into it. A village elder from the east described the change simply. We used to hear gunshots before we heard help. Now we hear drones before we hear danger. That sound, it means someone is watching. Someone is with us. And so, the turning point came not from a single battle, but from a new kind of thinking. Traore had not just reshaped tactics. He had reshaped trust. For the first time in years, citizens felt that their government was ahead of the threat, that it could see what they could not, that it could act before it was too late. The battlefield was no longer a place of reaction. It was a theater of design. But the true test of this transformation was still to come, deep in the forests, where power did not lie in numbers, but in names. They believed they were safe, hidden under dense trees, shielded by routine, surrounded by silence. For years, the masterminds of terror operated like ghosts, rarely seen, never caught. Their movements were erratic. Their hideouts known only to whispers. They communicated in code, traveled by night, and surrounded themselves with fear. But this time, fear turned against them. Burkina Faso's military had not only changed how it fought, it had changed whom it hunted. No longer chasing foot soldiers across the bush, the strategy turned upward, toward the minds behind the mayhem. It began with patterns. The drones, always circling, mapped routines. A convoy always stopping at the same clearing, a group assembling on Fridays beneath a particular grove, a signal fire that always preceded movement. What seemed random was, under close observation, deeply habitual. And then came the strike. One afternoon, a cluster of senior terrorist leaders met beneath thick canopy, discussing plans, rotating guards, laughing among loyalists. They had done this many times before. They did not know that above them, an eye had been watching for weeks. The attack came in seconds. A guided munition tore through the treetops. The explosion did not just kill, it unmade certainty. Guards scattered. Survivors fled, but the routes had already been sealed. Within minutes, special forces emerged from the bush. There were no speeches, no mercy, no survivors. The names of the dead were not released publicly. But within the insurgent networks, the message was immediate and devastating. For years, these figures had represented more than leadership. They were legend. The ones who trained new recruits, the ones who negotiated between factions, the ones who claimed divine right to sow chaos. Now they were gone. Entire cells went silent. Orders stopped flowing. Younger commanders panicked, unsure whether to run or lie low. Rumors spread fast. The sky knows your name. One captured fighter, barely 20, whispered during interrogation, "Even the tall trees are not safe anymore. If our leaders can fall like this, we have no shadows left." The psychological rupture was profound. What bullets could not break in years, clarity accomplished in days. Morale collapsed. Internal suspicion grew. Command chains, once tight and ideological, frayed under the weight of fear. But the reaction was not limited to the insurgents. Across Burkina Faso, news of the strike spread without official announcement. Villagers in the north lit fires in gratitude. Mothers who had lost sons prayed aloud, not in mourning, but in release. In mosques and marketplaces, people spoke the names of their fallen as if laying them to rest a second time, this time with dignity. For many, it was not revenge. It was closure. In the capital, newspapers ran front-page headlines without photographs, just bold letters. "They are no longer among us." The military, restrained in its tone, did not gloat. Traore, in a brief televised statement, said only this: "Justice does not celebrate. It restores. And now, we return to the people what fear tried to steal." International observers noted the sophistication of the strike. Some questioned the legality of extrajudicial eliminations. Others praised the precision and restraint. Regional allies in the Sahel applauded quietly, seeing in Burkina Faso a model of what coordinated intelligence and air-ground strategy could accomplish. But inside the country, the response was more than strategic. It was spiritual. Burkina Faso had for years been made to feel small, its state weak, its future hijacked. But in one act of coordinated justice, the illusion was shattered. The architects of violence no longer stood above the law. The soil of the nation, once stained, now bore witness to restoration. In the days that followed, something shifted in the tone of the streets. Fear did not vanish, but it weakened. People looked up again, not in dread of what might fall from the sky, but in trust of who now watched from above. And so, with one blow, the battlefield changed. Not just in tactics, in terms. The enemy no longer operated in darkness. Their secrets were now visible. Their names no longer protected them. And the people once mute found their voice again, each whisper now a declaration: "We are not defenseless." But defeating commanders is one battle. Rebuilding what they destroyed, that is the war still to come. Victory in battle means little if the people remain hungry, scattered, and afraid. President Ibrahim Traoré understood this. That is why, for every drone strike and ground raid, there was another convoy, slower, quieter, but no less vital. These were not tanks. They were trucks, stacked with rice, sacks of grain, jerry cans of water, medical supplies, notebooks for children. In towns once cut off by fear, these convoys became the second wave of liberation. Soldiers, once seen only as warriors, now stood guard beside queues of mothers waiting for food. In marketplaces that had echoed with gunfire, voices began to rise again, bartering, praying, laughing cautiously. The fields, long overgrown and silent, felt footsteps again, not of insurgents, but of farmers returning with seed in one hand and hope in the other. In one central village, a woman held up a small bag of sugar given by the army and said, "We thought they forgot us. Now we know they were always coming. It was more than logistics. It was an announcement. The state is back." In places where distrust had festered, the army brought more than aid. They brought accountability. Not every interaction was perfect, but for the first time, villagers saw soldiers listening, not commanding. They saw health workers arriving beside rifles. They saw school supplies packed next to bulletproof vests, and that changed everything. Children returned to school, some for the first time in years. Small mosques reopened, markets reassembled. Livestock stolen by armed groups were retrieved and returned, an act small in scale but massive in symbolism. Among the most quietly powerful gestures was the attention given to the orphans, the smallest victims of the longest war. In makeshift shelters, aid officers sat with children who had no parents to speak for them. The government promised, and for once delivered, food parcels, medical kits, direct payments to caretakers. It was no longer just a war against terror. It was a restoration of dignity. At the heart of this effort was not just the army, it was the VDPS, the Civilian Defense Volunteers. Farmers, shopkeepers, students, they did not carry drones or command tanks. But they carried something just as valuable, trust. They knew the terrain. They recognized faces. They listened to whispers in dialects no intelligence agency could decode. Traore empowered them not as pawns, but as partners. With radios and training, they became the eyes and ears of the rebirth. This shift, from top-down control to bottom-up trust, redefined what it meant to be defended. The defense of the nation was no longer just a military burden. It became a civic contract. And the politics followed. In Parliament, debates turned from abstractions to logistics. How many more schools? How fast can we resettle the displaced? How do we ensure this victory is not temporary? Opposition voices, once critical of Traore's assertiveness, began echoing his language, sovereignty, unity, purpose. No longer was the national conversation about waiting for external rescue. It was about building internal resilience. A young politician tweeted, "The soil bleeds less when the people believe more." Across the nation, murals began to appear. Not of presidents or generals, but of farmers sowing seeds, soldiers lifting children, women handing out bread. A new iconography was forming, one not of power but of protection. Because in the end, what was reclaimed was not just land. It was the idea of Burkina Faso, a country not defined by wounds, but by healing hands. And yet questions remain. What if the strikes stop? What if fear resurfaces? What if neighboring conflicts spill over? The fight for security may be shifting, but the war for the soul of the nation is far from over. For years, Burkina Faso was a footnote in global discussions, mentioned in reports, rarely in headlines. When the world did speak of it, it was in the language of pity, aid appeals, refugee figures, insurgent maps. Its sovereignty was framed as fragility, its people, statistics. But then something unexpected happened. Burkina Faso stopped waiting. Under President Ibrahim Traoré, the country took security into its own hands, not through press conferences or pleas, but through precision and principle. The transformation was not requested permission. It was a declaration, and the world noticed. Within the region, ECOWAS and the African Union offered cautious acknowledgement. Privately, officials across the Sahel expressed quiet admiration. Many had faced the same enemies, but few had turned the tide. What Traoré had demonstrated was not just tactical innovation, it was strategic defiance. Burkina Faso did not mimic the foreign security models of wait and train. It rejected the dependency cycle. No sprawling foreign bases, no rotating contractors. Instead, it built an ecosystem, community intelligence, regional patrols, targeted drone strikes, all stitched together not by outside hands but by its own. This self-styled doctrine drew mixed reactions. Western observers praised the efficiency but raised eyebrows at the opacity. Where were the safeguards? The oversight? The human rights protocols? Washington notably remained silent. France, long present in the region, found itself displaced, not by another empire but by a nation reclaiming its agency. And yet this silence spoke volumes, because the Burkina Faso model raised a question no outsider could easily answer. If a landlocked country, battered by war, under-resourced and often ignored, can build its own way forward, what does that say about those who said it couldn't? The campaign became more than national. It became symbolic. For countries long treated as security experiments, rotating through missions, mandates, consultants, Burkina Faso offered an alternative: sovereignty first, strategy second, survival always. Traoré's speeches reflected this posture. He no longer asked for empathy. He spoke of dignity. He addressed his people, not donors. And in doing so, he reframed Burkina Faso's place in the world, not as a victim of terror, but as an author of its own defense. It was not isolationism. It was self-definition. And in an era where many African states still negotiate for relevance, Burkina Faso made itself impossible to ignore by refusing to be invisible. But reclaiming attention is one thing. Sustaining it and protecting it from foreign pressure is a battle still ahead. Victory is never final, especially not in a land where conflict takes many forms: bullets, rumors, hunger, doubt. For Burkina Faso, the question is no longer if it can fight back. It has. The question now is, what kind of future will it choose to build from this momentum? President Ibrahim Traoré has lit a path, but the path is narrow, steep, and still flanked by danger. Retaliation is inevitable. Terrorist cells, though fractured, are not extinct. Some may regroup beyond borders. Others may shift tactics, targeting civilians, infrastructure, trust itself. The enemy adapts, so too must the nation. But for the first time in decades, Burkina Faso is not chasing peace. It is shaping it. The immediate priority is consolidation, ensuring that liberated areas do not relapse into fear. This means permanent outposts, local governance restored, justice systems revived. It means turning military presence into civic presence, schools, clinics, courts. Economically, the state must translate security into livelihood. Seeds must follow soldiers. Irrigation must follow clearance. Trade routes must reopen not just under protection, but with purpose. The fight for dignity is not just about guns. It is about grain. It is about jobs. It is about ownership. And ownership must be shared. The people, especially youth, are not merely beneficiaries of peace. They are its builders. Across the countryside, young volunteers have risked their lives not just to fight, but to farm, to teach, to testify. Their courage must now be met with opportunity. Training, education, inclusion. Security without future is only delay. Security with future is design. This is where Burkina Faso's greatest strength lies, not just in drones or battalions, but in belonging. The fight is no longer only for territory. It is for narrative. Traoré's government has the rarest of currencies: belief. People believe their voices matter. They believe the sky watches for them, not against them. They believe the land is not cursed, but blessed and worthy of harvest. The road ahead is long, but it is theirs. Let no one mistake the dust on Burkina Faso's boots for retreat. It is the dust of forward motion, of a people not pushed by fear, but pulled by vision. Because in this nation, fear may have started the war, but dignity will finish it, and history will remember who wrote the final chapter. There are moments in history when a nation doesn't just defend itself, it redefines itself. Burkina Faso has reached such a moment. Once painted as fragile, forgotten, or fractured, the country now stands as a symbol of what is possible when courage meets clarity. When technology serves people, not power. When sovereignty is not a slogan, but a system. And when the soil that once soaked in silence begins to echo with the sound of life returning. The campaign was never just about drones, battalions, or battles. It was about becoming whole again. Every convoy of food, every school reopened, every family reunited. These were not side effects. They were the point. They were the proof. Proof that resilience is not passive, it is active. It is a choice made every day by farmers who return to their fields, by mothers who refuse to flee again, by soldiers who stand not just for defense, but for direction. Burkina Faso chose not to wait for pity or permission. It chose to walk forward, and in doing so, it has offered the continent and the world, a question we must all now face. If one small, landlocked nation, battered by insurgency and overlooked by power, can rise, what truly holds the rest of us back? The map may not change, but the meaning behind the names will. Burkina Faso no longer stands in the shadows. It walks in its own light, carried by its people, guided by vision, and grounded in the unshakable belief that dignity is not given. It is defended. If this story stirred something in you, do not scroll away. Share it, speak it, carry it forward. Let the world see what a continent rising looks like. Fear has fallen. Now let the future begin.